Welcome to the Fantasy Bros Podcast, a new podcast where two brothers debate about fantasy football. Da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na, Fantasy Bros!
Yeah.
I'm your host, Dylan Wigella, here with my co-host,
Mitchell Wigella, a.k.a. the Life-Size Bobblehead.
the life-size bobblehead. Gotta love it. All right, so the first thing that we wanted to do, this is show 2, by the way. We wanted to say thanks to our listeners for listening, for providing. We got some useful feedback, and most importantly, for our one YouTube subscriber. Please go to YouTube and subscribe Fantasy Bros Podcast.
Gotta start somewhere.
Some other announcements. We do have an email address now. It's thefantasyfootballbrothers@gmail.com. Contact us with questions, and we'll get those answered on the air for you. We also have a Facebook page. It's called the Fantasy Football Bros. Make sure you search that, like it, share it, and invite your friends. The last announcement will be that we have a new producer, Nick Wigella, which is our brother, and we might be on iTunes soon, is what is hoping. We also are going to be releasing podcasts on a weekly basis. We're going to try to get those out to you on Wednesdays. Early Wednesday or late Tuesday is when you can expect the podcast. That's so that you can have it for the upcoming week. Time for news.
News alert! News alert!
Ameer Abdullah, this is news out of Detroit, is expected to be the feature back, but the Detroit Free Press does not think he's a lock for 200 carries. Mitchell, your thoughts?
I think he's a lock for 200 carries if he stays healthy. I think they've been pretty adamant that they want him as the feature back, and I don't think the Detroit Free Press has really ever been right about anything ever.
I guess that's true. If you guys don't know, we are actually from Livonia, outside of the Detroit area, currently stationed in Phoenix. I actually agree with this, though. I'm not sure that Ameer Abdullah gets the 200 carries. The Lions are not a rushing team. I think we were one of the worst teams last year in rushing. I'm not sure the exact rank. This is interesting, though, especially because of our bet. So for those of you who are the first-time listeners, we do have a bet that goes on season long where the loser of the series of bets has to get slapped in the face, and they also have to buy a jersey for the other player. And the bet currently standing is that Mitchell has Ameer Abdullah getting 900 yards. I bet that he gets under that. The next set of news. Jamison Crowder has missed the last 3 days of training camp with an injured hamstring and is considered day-to-day. You concerned about this, Mitchell?
If anything, I'm a little more excited. I mean, for fantasy owners, I think that Terrell Pryor has a lot more upside now. If he is this hamstring to linger and he continues to be injured, then Terrell Pryor can just shine.
Yeah, I actually really like that entire offense. Really, I like Kirk Cousins, Jamison Crowder, Terrell Pryor, Jordan Reed are all pretty high on my list. I think they'll be very successful. However, the only problem with hamstrings is I don't know how many times I've had a player who had a hamstring, and it's just they're always questionable, which is kind of sucks when you go and try to figure out like if you need a streamer or what. And it's something that you don't want on your roster. We'll see if this goes away. If it goes away and it never comes back, I really don't think it's something to be concerned about. I'm not moving them as of now in my rankings. I don't know about you.
No, not yet. I mean, I think we still need some time. We still have, 5 weeks until our opening game, if not 6 weeks?
Exactly, and I'm so excited. The next news stays in Washington. Jordan Reed has an injured toe. He's day-to-day. Has not been released what the injury is. Not good news to hear this from Jordan Reed again, Mitchell. Thoughts on Jordan Reed and the toe?
I mean, when it comes down to Jordan Reed and his toe, I'm also not going to be too concerned just because it's a toe. But then again, I have seen turf toe, take out the best of them. Like A.J. Green spent a lot of time on the sideline due to turf toe. So I guess we'll have to find out the severity of it as the weeks come. But I'm not concerned at the moment.
Exactly. I've had Reed a lot of the last years. I love the guy. He's like my drug when it comes to fantasy football. You're my vice. Like I can't not draft him if he's there. He's got too much upside for me. So this doesn't really change him on my draft board. Mitchell, does it change him on yours? Just the history of injuries.
He's already been changed on my boards just due to history of injuries. So he's already been affected. At this point, it's expected. I'm keeping him right where he is.
The next news is out of Green Bay. Jamal Williams, for those of you who don't know, he is the backup to Ty Montgomery right now. News out of camp is that he was running with the first team, and he was getting praised for his pass blocking. Now, Ty Montgomery is still the starter, but does Jamal Williams take that role, Mitchell? What do you think?
Well, I think that this was something that I brought up on the last podcast, and we can go into another bet that we made last time, which would be the 900 yards for Ty Montgomery that you bet in favor for, and I bet that he would go under. I think one of these rookie running backs will have to emerge and take a huge chunk of his stuff, or really his playing time, and I think he'll be moved back into a flex running back wide receiver position where he belongs and not a feature back role.
See, I disagree. I've heard that Ty Montgomery's put a lot of work into pass blocking. I just think this is some nonsense news. Thought it was interesting to bring up, especially because of that bet. And we only have one other bet to remind you guys of. That's the Leonard Fournette greater than 10 total touchdowns, and Mitchell's got Fournette there. I'm betting against the guy. Couple more pieces of news, and we'll move on to the agenda. Will Fuller. This one's kind of big. He's out 2 to 3 months with a collarbone. I honestly don't even know who the third string guy is. That Braxton Miller?
Braxton Miller.
Braxton Miller maybe moves up your draft board here. If you believe in Braxton Miller, maybe he can steal some targets. But he is on Houston. Keep that in mind. Mark Ingram has been noted in training camp as being very active in the pass game. Me and Mitchell both were pretty high on Mark Ingram. And I think that this basically confirms that. Mitchell, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still pretty high on Mark Ingram. Still think he's a talented back. Still think he's going to have a great year.
And the last piece of news is that Carlos Hyde is listed as a starter. There's been some debate in the fantasy community over the weeks whether he would start. And RotoWire is listing him as a starter, saying that he will likely open this season as a starter. A little bit of advice for those of you just getting into fantasy out there. Download RotoWire. Download an app where you get your news. This will help you stay on top of your league throughout the season. All right, so the agenda today is going to be as follows for those of you listening. We're going to do a wide receiver episode. The top 20 wide receivers, and during that we'll mix in our bold predictions for the year. Sleepers, busts, and that will complete the episode 2 here. So let's jump right into it. Mitchell, who do you have as your number 1 rated wide receiver?
Antonio Brown out of Central Michigan University.
Woo woo, Antonio Brown. Yeah, I agree. I think this is a clear-cut decision. Antonio Brown's being drafted at 4.1 average draft position on Yahoo. So I think
Which you don't agree with, right? You think he should be taken 3rd overall over Ezekiel Elliott.
I do. I think that Ezekiel Elliott's being drafted too high. I'm worried about the suspensions. Like if I was drafting now, I'm drafting Antonio Brown over him. If Zeke gets 2 games, I'd consider it. I just think there's going to be a regression in the Cowboys offense, which my wide receiver rankings will reflect today. So we're unanimous on number 1. We might have a disagreement here on number 2. At number 2 wide receiver, I have Julio Jones.
I also have Julio Jones as my number 2.
Interesting. And Julio Jones' ADP is 6.8, by the way, on Yahoo. Any regression or progression for Julio, you think, this year?
I think he might get better, honestly. I mean, don't ask me exactly why. I just think that Julio Jones is on the uprise of his career. And I do predict him to have better stats than Odell Beckham. I think that Odell Beckham's actually going to go slightly down in progression this year. I think it's about time.
I think Odell will, but I think the reason that Odell will is just because of the amount of talent on that offense. Eli is one to kind of lock on a little bit, but I think that there's so many people that need to eat in that offense. So last year, Julio Jones had 218 fantasy points in standard. And just so you guys know, we've been talking about standard here. This is not PPR. And he had 83 catches for 1,409 yards and 6 touchdowns. I do think that Julio Jones will have more touchdowns this year. They're talking about using him in the red zone more. We have a new offensive coordinator there. My one concern would be the Super Bowl hangover.
I don't necessarily know if I believe in the Super Bowl hangover. I mean, I do. Like, I think it's very unlikely that they make it back to the Super Bowl. I'll say that clearly. But I don't think it's going to stop one player's progression. Cam Newton was really a fluke. I mean, look at Jonathan Stewart. He came out last year and had a great year on a team that had a Super Bowl hangover. You can still have superstars even though the whole team as a whole is suffering. That's why Demaryius Thomas is still one of the top wide receivers available in fantasy, even though the Broncos did terrible on offense.
Exactly, and I'm actually pretty high on Demaryius Thomas. You can basically call him Mr. Consistent. But Julio, man, that catch he had in the Super Bowl was insane.
Yeah.
One of the best Super Bowl catches of all time, for sure.
And I do agree about the upping the touchdowns. That's what I was going to bring up. I think his yards may drop a little bit just because the new system and, it's possible.
I guess the question is, do you think Julio Jones plays 16 games this year?
That's a very, very hard question to answer. I hope he does. I really do.
All right, number 3, I have Odell Beckham Jr.
Number 3, I also have Odell Beckham Jr.
So we're very much the same so far, and he's drafted as 5.6, so most places will have him ranked slightly higher than Julio Jones. I disagree with that, and I just think Julio's better for the reasons we mentioned, but Odell's an exciting player. Talent-wise, you could probably make an argument that he's the best wide receiver in the league. But
yeah, sure. The thing with me is I've never, ever had belief in Eli Manning. Even when he won the Super Bowl, I was like, you know what? That wasn't because of him.
So if you're drafting 4th or 3rd and you want a wide receiver, think about it this way. Do you want Ben Roethlisberger, Matt Ryan, or Eli Manning throwing to your quarterback?
So basically, they're only going to be off by a handful of fantasy points, most likely at the end of the year. Yep. Unless injuries. Okay.
Number 4, who do you got, Mitchell?
Number 4, I have Mike Evans.
Mike Evans. I do not. I actually have Jordy Nelson there. And I do want to make my case for Jordy Nelson, but I want to hear your case for Mike Evans first.
Well, I mean, Mike Evans has gotten better and better. You know what I mean? He's only been in the league, what now, 3 years?
3rd year. I believe this is his 3rd year.
3rd year. Okay. So, I was watching a lot of film on Mike Evans recently. And by recently, I mean about 3 hours before this podcast. With that being said, his last stats for this last year was 1,321 yards and 12 touchdowns. Now he has actual weapons surrounding him on the team. Like he has O.J. Howard at the tight end, and he also has Deshaun Jackson take it off over the top. So I think that just makes his potential even better because he was already being double-teamed. So now he's going to be double-teamed less. So I think that's why I'm rising him up in my rankings above, the likes of Jordy Nelson and A.J. Green. And plus, 12 touchdowns, that's great. That's what you want in a fantasy receiver. 12
touchdowns is great. I will expect that number to regress at least a little bit. But the case for Jordy Nelson is, so injuries aside, and he is getting older. So that is a risk. There's a risk there. Jordy Nelson's numbers last year were 1,257 yards and 14 touchdowns. I want Aaron Rodgers throwing to my wide receiver, my number 1. I don't want Jameis Winston. I don't want to have to worry about if there's any regression or any issues there. That offense, and he's been good. Jameis has been good. He's had 4,000 yards. But I'm going to make this is a bold prediction for a quarterback. I won't say the actual one. I'll give you the actual number on our quarterbacks and tight end podcast that we're going to have next week. But I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to go nuts this year. I think that offense is going to be really good. I'm really high on the Packers offense. And I know a lot of my friends back home are going to hate me for that because we are Lions fans. Jordy Nelson is consistent. He gets a lot of red zone targets. And like I said, you want Aaron Rodgers thrown to your number 1. He's Aaron Rodgers' favorite guy. Number 5, who do you got, Mitchell?
Number 5 for the wide receivers, I have A.J. Green.
AJ Green. I also have AJ Green. Just to backtrack a second, Jordy Nelson's average draft position is 14.7, and Mike Evans is 8.4. So there is a discrepancy in the consensus of rankings there. AJ Green, tell me what you like about AJ Green.
Well, I mean, AJ Green has been good since he came into the league. He's always been a star. He has not had a year in his entire career where he didn't have more than 1,000 yards up until this last year, and he only missed it by 36 yards.
Didn't he also miss?
He missed
8 games.
He missed a lot of games this last year too. I don't know the exact number, but he still had 964 yards and 4 touchdowns. And just to do a quick little backtrack, the year before, 10 touchdowns, then 6, 11, 11, 7. So this last year was his worst year, but it was mostly due to injury. And with that being said, he's been consistently right around that ballpark of, a wide receiver 5, 6, 7. So that's exactly where I would plan on taking him.
AJ Green played 10 of the 16 games and almost had 1,000 yards.
Exactly, and still dropped 4 touchdowns, and that's not great.
And I actually have a bold prediction right now. My first bold prediction of the wide receiver podcast here is even though it doesn't reflect in my rankings because of certain concerns, but I'm going to make a bold prediction here that AJ Green is going to be the number 1 fantasy wide receiver in 2017.
I do not agree with that. I would be willing to make a bet that he doesn't make it into the top 3.
The top 3. We'll come back to that. I'm not sure if I'm willing to bet that. This is a very bold prediction, and that's the point of bold predictions. But I think that AJ Green he's a monster. He's underrated, and the dude's been in like the top 5. If you want to go top 5, certainly, but you have him ranked at 5, so that wouldn't really make sense. I'll go top 4.
Nope.
All right. Moving along, AJ Green's draft ADP is 12.3 on Yahoo. Number 6. This is where I have Mike Evans. Who do you have here?
This is where I have Jordy Nelson.
So we just had Nelson and Evans flipped. I like Evans. I had him last year. He actually won me a 12-teamer PPR league last year. I traded for him, and my team was stacked, though. I had David Johnson, Mike Evans. It's hard to lose with that. I also had LaShawn McCoy. It wasn't even fair, really. But anything else to add on Mike Evans or Jordy Nelson here for you?
I think we pretty much covered both of them, but, fun fact, I just did a little search on Jordy Nelson here, and the good news is for fantasy owners that CTE does not scare Jordy Nelson, and that's according to the WEAU 11 hours ago.
All right, moving on to number 7. In number 7, I have coming in here, and this is, I think mine's a little different than a lot of the websites, have, but I have T.Y. Hilton here at 7.
I also have T.Y. Hilton at 7.
And his average draft position is 19.9. My concern is Andrew Luck. And Andrew Luck, is he healthy? Is he going to practice at all before this season? If Andrew Luck is healthy and plays the full 16, I think Hilton has a great year. He's Andrew Luck's favorite target, and Andrew Luck's a great quarterback.
Now, see, the thing with T.Y. Hilton is he's so underwhelming sometimes, you know what I mean, with big plays and whatnot. I kind of just forgot about him, and honestly, I had him lower on my actual rankings. Like when I went through and did my top 100, I had him lower, and that's just a base ranking, But then I went back and I looked through his stats, and this is year 4 of him doing 1,000 yards and never having less than 5 touchdowns in his entire career. He's 5 to 7 every single year. He's never capped out past 7, but that's still respectable rankings. And, good yardage.
The concern is touchdown. He had 1,448 yards last year.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be touchdowns if they can make him more useful in the red zone. But I think that he can as long as Andrew Luck can stay on his feet.
I believe that he led the league. He led the league in receiving yards last year, which is pretty substantial. All right, coming in at number 8, I have Amari Cooper.
I have Michael Thomas.
My case for Amari Cooper is, I think, as long as his touchdowns go up, because he had 1,153 yards, 5 touchdowns, and I know Crabtree's there, and I'm high on Crabtree too, but I just see progression from David Carr and that offense with Marshawn Lynch there. I think Amari Cooper probably will finish as obviously a top 10 wide receiver, but I like Cooper a lot, and I think that I would take him 8th off the board. What about you, Mitchell?
I mean, I definitely like Cooper. You'll hear his name shortly here, but with Michael Thomas, I mean, he did so good his rookie year, and then they got rid of Brandon Cooks and essentially took down a lot of his competition. And I love Willie Snead. Don't get me wrong. We'll bring him up later in the podcast as well. But with that being said, I think he has way too much upside, and I'm really picking Michael Thomas over, pretty much over Amari Cooper because of who's throwing to him. I love Derek Carr too, but Drew Brees is just too consistent.
That's the thing, though. Drew Brees likes to spread the ball around, and I mean, my next person is Michael Thomas, but I have him a little bit lower because than Ty and Amari is because Brees, I know everyone's thinking, okay, all these targets are going to be there because Cooks is gone, but Brees has never been a person to target one receiver over and over and over again. He's so efficient and so good at spreading the ball around. I mean, I don't think there's too much of a difference between the two. I think that Cooper has a little more upside with that.
I mean, I agree that Brees spreads the ball around, but I mean, he definitely has his favorite targets. You know what I mean? Brandon Cook was one of his favorite targets. He threw to him an average of 8 times a game was his targets. I think I just looked that up. Other than that, I would just like to bring up Colston, Joe Horn. They were easily the leaders.
They were good, but I don't know. I can see Cooper being the go-to guy. And Brees never. I mean, he has a go-to guy, but it's not the same. I mean, you could say Jimmy Graham, maybe. I get the argument, but I just disagree. I think that New Orleans is going to spread the ball around. They always have. I don't see that changing now that Cooks is gone. That's why I like Snead, is because I think Snead's going to get almost as many targets as Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I can hear what you're saying, but I believe that it's going to be harder for Cooper to get all those targets because Michael Crabtree's underrated. I mean, I think Michael Crabtree's one of the better wide receivers in the league.
I think Michael Crabtree is underrated, but I just think that offense in general is going to be quite a bit better. Who do you have at 9? I have Michael Thomas.
I have Dez Bryant.
Dez Bryant. See, I'm not big on Dez Bryant, but you guys will find that out by my ratings. Enlighten me on Dez Bryant.
I mean, I like Dak's progression in year 1. I thought he was really good, and I think Dez Bryant didn't really get the benefit off of that because it took him a while to really start throwing the ball into the end zone. What did you go 3 games without throwing an NFL touchdown? And he still won 3 of them. But either way, basically, I mean, he's been pretty consistent. He had his last 2 years of his career have been his worst too, but I think now he's got a competent quarterback that's willing to throw the ball downfield. He's obviously going to have a lot more confidence coming into year 2, especially after coming off of an Offensive Player of the Year award or Rookie of the Year award. So, I mean, that's my reason for keeping him up there. He's really talented. Even if it wasn't a catch, which it wasn't, I think that he's going to have a good bounce-back fantasy year.
Yeah, I just like I've been saying all along. I mean, number one, let me be fair about my bias. I hate the Dallas Cowboys. There are a few teams that I hate more than the Dallas Cowboys, if any. So maybe I'm a little biased here, but I just see regression, especially with Dak in that offense. Not sure how much regression will happen, but I don't know. I don't like Dez. I don't want him on my team, to be honest. I would take him. I usually go by my rankings in the draft, but I would begrudgingly take him because I would have to root for Dez Bryant. You know what I'm saying, guys? So number 10, I have Doug Baldwin at number 10.
Number 10 coming in for me is Amari Cooper. By the way, just to backtrack a little bit, I've only had Dez Bryant on my team one time, and he did awful for me. I think he got injured right off the bat. I think it was not this year, last year, but the one before that. So I also do not plan on taking him. I just wanted to do my honest rankings.
Right. That is something too, that needs to be taken into account is it's like kind of having a hangover if you pick a player and they do really bad for you and then they get injured and you kind of forever feel like I got to stay away from them. And that's like Keenan Allen for me this year. I can't do it again. I've been burned by him. I have Doug Baldwin. I think Doug Baldwin's underrated. I think he's being underdrafted. His average draft position is 24.5. He's a number one wide receiver on a great team with a great quarterback. Don't think Doug Baldwin gets the respect he deserves. Last year, he had a reduction in touchdowns because the year before he had, I believe, 14. And he had 1,128 yards and 7 touchdowns. I would expect to see the touchdowns go up and the yards stay the same. Touchdowns are funny, though. Moving on to number 11. Here's where I have Dez. So I don't have him that far down from Mitchell, probably two people. Still a talented player, and I can't deny that. I just don't like the guy. Who do you have at 11?
I have Alshon Jeffrey at 11.
Alshon Jeffrey.
I
hate Alshon Jeffrey.
I think if Alshon Jeffrey stays healthy, he has the potential to finish in the top. I mean, hell, he has the potential to finish in the top 5. He's one of the most talented wide receivers in the league, undoubtedly. He's done some great things. He just has been playing with Jay Cutler the whole time. And now he has Carson Wentz, up-and-coming quarterback, got some good targets around him. I think this is where he's truly going to shine. I think he's going to have a great time.
I suspect we saw the regression from Carson Wentz at the end of his year last year, and I just don't know if they've fixed those problems in the offense. I don't know if I believe in Carson Wentz yet. So I have Alshon quite a bit down, plus it's the injury concern, and I don't know. I'm not as high on him as most people, but you'll see that reflected in my rankings here in just a bit. At 12, this is someone I really like, Mr. Consistency, Demaryius Thomas. I have as my 12th ranked wide receiver. The guy has had, I believe, over 1,000 yards for the past 5 seasons. You're not going to get someone who's going to go off, although the offense is talking about using him more. But you're going to get someone who's going to give you 1,000 yards, about 6-7 touchdowns. It's a great wide receiver too. Borderline wide receiver 1. Who do you have at 12, Mitchell?
I also have Demaryius Thomas at
12. 13.
Doug Baldwin.
You have Doug Baldwin. See, here is where I have another player, and I got to make another bold prediction. 13. Average draft position of 45.5. Who do you think this is, Mitchell?
I'm not going to guess because I looked at your sheet.
Oh, so he's cheating. I have Terrell Pryor here. In my prediction, although I have him ranked as my 13th, is that Terrell Pryor will be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver by the end of the year. I think that the sky is the limit for Terrell Pryor. He's made some great progress in the transition from quarterback to wide receiver. I think that Kirk Cousins is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. I really do like Kirk Cousins. I think that's shown in his total QBR, especially fantasy-wise. I don't know how he's rated so low, but we'll get to quarterbacks later. Terrell Pryor is going to have a great year, and I got him above a lot of people. I almost feel like I want to put him ahead of Dez. I'm not going to change it now, but I've been moving him up and up as I go along. Mitchell, who's your 13?
My 13 is Doug Baldwin. But I do agree with you about Terrell Pryor. I think he has a lot of potential. He's not much farther down on my list. But I put Baldwin here. I probably would have put him higher. I know he's had some consistent results over the past 2 years, but before that, there was nothing. And, he had Russell Wilson for 2 years, or 2 years before he started putting up 1,000-yard seasons. So my question is, when is somebody going to come out of that offense to take away the targets that he's seeing? And is this that year?
I think a lot of that was, Golden Tate was there for so long, keeping him down on the depth chart.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm wondering if somebody like Golden Tate, like maybe
Tyler Lockett
comes out finally and does what people are projecting him to do. It really just depends on what the whole thing is. But that's why I put him there. But I do like the Terrell Pryor there. I thought about moving him up my list as well. So number 14 then.
14, I have Devontae Adams, and a lot of this goes off of my kind of feeling that Aaron Rodgers is going to have a career year this year. Although they will not throw as much, I feel like that offense is starting to click, especially towards the end of the year. I think Ty Montgomery is going to be good. I'm really high in the Green Bay offense, so I think it's going to be the best fantasy offense in the league.
I didn't even put Davante Adams in my top 20. He's actually listed under my bust category.
He's listed on your bust. I think we got a bet coming here. Just to give you guys an idea, Davante Adams' average draft position is 42.7, slightly above Terrell Pryor. Davante Adams had 997 yards and 12 touchdowns last year. What kind of bet were you thinking?
I bet he finishes with worse stats than last year.
I'm not going to deny there's probably going to be a regression. Last year he was one of the top 10 wide receivers in fantasy football, but I think ranking him where I did is a fair ranking for him.
Under 9 touchdowns.
Under 9 touchdowns. I don't like betting on touchdowns, but I believe in Davante Adams.
I can do under 1,000 yards.
He was under 1,000. I'll do under 9 touchdowns. We can do that. Let me write that down. Davante Adams. Not under 9, so he's going to have 8 or lower.
Yeah. If he hits 9, you win.
I think that Davante Adams is a sure thing. Number 2 in Green Bay. You can expect a good year from that. I know he's kind of a terrible wide receiver, but that doesn't really matter because he's in Green Bay. He's got Aaron Rodgers.
I mean, Randall Cobb could come back. You know what I mean? He could come back to haunt the team.
Randall Cobb is. I'm done with the whole Randall Cobb thing. People have been saying that for years. Oh, he's gonna be good now. He's gonna be good now.
He had a good year when Jordy was out.
I'm done with Randall Cobb. Yeah, when Jordy was out, but Jordy I think is gonna play mostly a full season. 14. Who did you have?
14. I had Brandon Cooks.
Brandon Cooks. Interesting. Let's hear your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I just like Brandon Cooks. I've liked him in New Orleans. I didn't think they stretched the ball enough with him. But I think that he's going to be great working with Bill Belichick. I mean, the dude's a mastermind. The last time they brought in a high-profile wide receiver, he ended up having the greatest wide receiver statistical season in the NFL. And I'm not saying that Brandon Cooks is Randy Moss, but what I am saying is that Brandon Cooks, I think, is going to have the best season of his career. And his ranking could significantly rise. The only reason I'm not putting him higher in my listing is because of Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski.
I have a bold prediction. My bold prediction is that Julian Edelman, and this is not how I have it in my rankings, just to be clear, bold prediction. Julian Edelman will have more fantasy points this year than Brandon Cooks.
I disagree.
There's a connection there between Brady and Edelman, and Edelman is, I think, one of the more underrated. He's actually one of my sleepers, but we'll get to that later, and I'll explain that in more detail later on. Moving on to number 15, this is where I have Brandon Cooks. I still think he's going to be good. I think the potential's there, which is kind of why I have them there. When you're getting later into the draft, I think it's a good idea. You need to have those solidified players, but you also need to have some players who have that potential to have a high floor and a relatively good ceiling.
Yeah.
Who do you have at 15?
15 is where I place Terrell Pryor.
All right, let's move on to 16 then. I have Michael Crabtree at number 16.
Okay, so this is a new ranking for me. I do not have Michael Crabtree, but I have DeAndre Hopkins at 16. I think that DeAndre Hopkins is going to have a bounce back year, and I think that Deshaun Watson will be the starting quarterback under center week 1. I think that's why.
Week 1? I don't know if it'll be week 1. I'm sure he'll take the job. I'm just not sold on him yet. Obviously, you might guys. I kind of have I'm like against rookies. I don't like to believe in rookies in fantasy. Maybe I can't pick them. But I don't trust rookie quarterbacks, especially. I actually do not have DeAndre Hopkins on my list. And you guys should know DeAndre Hopkins' average draft position is 27.9. So both me and Mitchell have him ranked lower. I have him ranked substantially lower than most experts. But I I don't see it with Hopkins. I don't see it. Moving on, I had Michael Crabtree. We talked about Crabtree earlier. I think Crabtree's great. Great potential for touchdowns. Good rapport with David Carr. Moving on to 17. This is where I have Alshon Jeffrey.
This is where I have Allen Robinson.
Allen Robinson's an interesting person. Let's talk about him for a second.
I like having Allen Robinson there because as long as Blake Bortles does anything above absolutely terrible, I think that he'll put up respectable fantasy lines because he's a very talented wide receiver. He's had pretty good stats when he came in, as we know.
Bortles is so bad. I was reading that Bortles, I know it's just practice, but he threw 5 interceptions in practice. I do, however, believe in Tom Coughlin, and I think that Tom Coughlin's going to really help that team. But I don't know.
He had a significant drop. Allen Robinson's stats almost dropped in half, but he did finish top 5 in 2015, I think. So, he still had 883 yards and 6 touchdowns last year.
I think that team's going to be a run-first team. I don't know. I'm not predicting the bounce back, but I still got him inside my top 20. So.
I think he's going to get back up to 1,000 yards and probably keep the touchdown total right where it is, which I think puts him right around 17. Wide receiver 17. I think that's fair ranking.
I don't have him too far behind that, but we'll get to that. 18, I have Sammy Watkins here.
Same.
And the thing with Sammy Watkins is you don't know about the injuries.
Yeah. He could go way up this list if he stays healthy.
The closer to the season it gets and the healthier he gets, I'll probably bump him up above Alshon Jeffrey, Cooks, and Crabtree and Adams. But I got to see it to believe it. I want to see him out there catching. I want to see him making some moves.
I'd like to see him play 2 quarters of a preseason game just to prove to the fans that he's going to be all right.
Right? The guy has been hurt every year. He's I have him and Keenan Allen kind of I don't know.
The Bills are even realizing it. They didn't pick up his option. They chose not to because they're like, well, dude, you haven't played a full season for us ever. So I don't know if that's going to work out.
And 19 is where I have Allen Robinson.
I have Michael Crabtree at 19.
Michael Crabtree at 19. I think Crabtree's a solid pick. Allen Robinson, I express how I feel about him. I'm not sold. Number 20, I was torn. So the people I wanted to put here, I ended up going with Keenan Allen with the upside. Is that what you picked as well?
Yep.
But part of me, and I'm trying not to be just a Lions homer, I really wanted to put Golden Tate there. I think Golden Tate, just looking at how he played at the end of last year, after the whole Marvin Jones explosion, I would love to have Golden Tate here. Maybe I got Golden Tate next. I think Golden Tate's going to have a much better year this year.
Yeah, I would go literally just to show you where I had certain people, person that you were talking about. I had Keenan Allen, Golden Tate, Emmanuel Sanders, Julian Edelman, Devontae Adams.
Okay.
So Devontae Adams wide receiver 25 compared to where you had him at 15.
I had Devontae at 14.
14.
So we had a big difference in that.
Yeah, about a 10 position difference.
Yeah, that was one of the big ones. What are your bold predictions, Mitch? I gave mine. Mine are Terrell Pryor, top 10, AJ Green, number 1 wide receiver, and Julian Edelman, more fantasy points.
Well,
Cooks.
This is going to go back to my wide receiver 16, and it's going to really bank on a rookie, kind of like you don't like doing. But I think that DeAndre Hopkins has over 10 touchdowns this year.
Over 10 touchdowns. You want to bet on that?
Sure.
10 touchdowns?
Give me 9. I'll do it.
I'll do it for 9. We got a bet! DeAndre Hopkins. Under 10 touchdowns. So 9 touchdowns or less. I think that's locked and loaded. I can't. I don't know, man. DeAndre Hopkins is so good, but that quarterback situation is just not friendly. How many touchdowns did DeAndre Hopkins have last year? Maybe I should have looked at that first.
Not many. It was not a great year, but come on, Brock Osweiler, he had 4. And then the year before with just a slightly, and in my opinion, slightly better quarterback situation, and not really, He had 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns.
So that DeAndre Hopkins is one. What's your other bold predictions?
Let me take a look here. So I got off topic. Marvin Jones finishes as a top 25 wide receiver.
Top 25. What is Marvin Jones' current rank? Let me take a look on Fantasy Football Pros.
I think he's around 50.
He's pretty far. He's 52. Is his average rank, ranking in as a tier 6 wide receiver. I don't think he breaks the top 25. Do you think Marvin Jones outplays Golden Tate this year?
That's kind of what the bold prediction is. It depends on if he outplays Golden Tate, but I think he definitely has the potential to, just purely off of, he won't have the same yards. Like, I think Golden Tate will break 1,000 yards, and I don't think Marvin Jones will. I think he'll be under it, around 800. But
touchdowns?
I think he'll be a red zone target. It wasn't completely healthy last year, and he lost a lot of playing time. But I think he's going to come out on top and try to stay on top.
I don't know if I agree with that. How tall is Golden Tate? I feel like, not Tate, Marvin Jones. I don't think he's that tall. I feel like Eric Ebron, he's 6'2", so he's like an average size. I think Riddick will get more of the targets in the red zone and Ebron. But okay.
It's just a bold prediction.
It's a bold prediction. Do you have any more before we take a slight transition here into our sleepers and our busts?
My third prediction was that Willie Snead will receive for over 1,000 yards and have over 6 touchdowns.
Over 1,000 yards and over 6 touchdowns. I think
that both
bold.
Wide receivers will have those stats. That's not that bold.
I don't think that, because what did Willie Snead had 1,000 yards last year, didn't he?
No way he had 1,000 yards.
I'm pretty sure that he did. He had a good year.
As number 3?
Yeah, Willie Snead was the man last year. He had 895 yards and 4 touchdowns.
So I'm really predicting that he does a little better than last year yards wise and gets more touchdowns.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so in a minute we are going to get into our sleepers and our busts. But I just want to remind you guys that you can email us at thefantasyfootballbrothers@gmail.com with questions. You can also ask us questions with the direct link to our email on our Facebook page, The Fantasy Football Bros. Please like and share that. And be our 3rd subscriber on YouTube. You can find us on YouTube as The Fantasy Football Bros. Find our channel. Make sure you subscribe. Listen every week. We love you guys. All right, moving on into the sleeper section. My number 1 sleeper, as I mentioned earlier, this is like a mid-round sleeper to target in your drafts. I really, really like Julian Edelman. I think he's being underdrafted right now. Julian Edelman's average draft position is, if I can pull it up right here real quick, his average draft position is, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get back to you on that for a second. Mitchell, can you go into your sleeper real quick?
I'm going to go like the complete opposite of what I've heard multiple experts say. And I'm sticking by Devontae Parker. I think that this is the year that Devontae Parker comes out, and I think he's going to pretty much mimic the kind of statistics that Jarvis Landry puts out, but maybe with potential for more touchdowns.
Would you like to make a bet that Jarvis Landry outperforms Devontae Parker?
No, I would not.
I'll give you 2-1 odds in our bet.
I'm okay.
All right, that's fair. I was trying to steal one. So let's see. Julian Edelman's average draft position is 45.9. So if you're in a 10-man league, that means that you're scooping him up in the middle of the 5th round. I think that if you can get him in the 5th round, that's good value. He's not going to lose targets. I really don't think he's going to lose targets. So he should have at least the same as he had last year. And I think he'll have more touchdowns than last year. I don't think the Patriots will get as many rushing touchdowns without LeGarrette Blount, to be honest. So if we're looking at Julian Edelman's stats of last year, he had over 1,000 yards, and I think he only had 3 touchdowns. But like I said, I expect that to increase. My next sleeper is a man out of San Francisco. What? Pierre Garçon. I think that I believe in Kyle Shanahan and saw what he did with Atlanta. I know the quarterback situation there is not friendly. Nick Foles is there? Is that who is quarterback in San Francisco?
Brian Hoyer.
Brian Hoyer. That's right. Yeah, sorry. I don't know why I'm thinking Nick Foles. Brian Hoyer, who's not special at any mean, but Pierre Garçon right now, he's their number one, and I will take a number one, especially for the value you're getting him. That's why I'm saying he's a sleeper, because he's a value. Pierre Garçon is being drafted at 114.6, and you're drafting the number one wide receiver on that offense. And that defense is terrible. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot, and they haven't really had a true person who could pass the ball or catch it in years. And I think Pierre Garçon doesn't get the fantasy respect that he gets. So that's a little later sleeper. Julian Edelman's like a mid-round. Mitchell, who's your second?
I'd like to just jump in on that really quick and just say absolutely not. I do not disagree. I do not agree at all. I think they had a better quarterback situation last year with Colin Kaepernick over Brian Hoyer. Give you that all day. He led a team to the NFC Championship. So that's
but I don't think that was Kaepernick. That was Jim Harbaugh and his coaching.
No, you can't put that much on coaching. You need a good quarterback to get there.
But Kaepernick is not a good quarterback. He's a backup quality quarterback.
Jim Harbaugh is not that great. Okay, the last time. But
I know you're just a State fan here trashing Harbaugh. Okay.
Other than that, even with only being the number one wide receiver on the 49ers, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, Torrey Smith, number one wide receiver, had like 600 yards. Jeremy Curley, number one receiver, had 667 yards.
Jeremy Curley was not a
Yes, he was the number one wide receiver last year
for the 49ers. Yeah, but who was their quarterback last year?
Colin Kaepernick.
Not the whole year.
Majority of the year. And if not, then it was Blaine Gabbert.
Yeah, Blaine Gabbert's terrible.
Yeah, so is Brian Hoyer.
Yeah, and they have a new offensive coordinator.
Dylan, you're just naming things.
It's a system.
Don't have the pieces yet.
I'm not naming things. It's
in the rebuild.
System. It's a system. Why do you think Bill Belichick gets players to perform? It's just
all right. You cannot compare Bill Belichick to a first-time head coach in Kyle Shanahan.
I'm just saying. You're saying coaches don't matter. I'm saying coaches do.
Coaches do matter. I agree with that.
Kyle Shanahan is a brilliant offensive mind.
But you can't just step into a system
Pierre Garçon is a good wide receiver. He's not a bad wide receiver.
He's an average wide receiver.
He's not Jeremy Curley. He's had over 1,000 yards for the past, I don't know how many years, close to 1,000 yards at least.
I mean, he's been a good complimentary piece. I don't think he's ever been a true number one to any quarterback.
He had over 1,000 yards last year. I mean, he's playing with, Deshaun Watson.
He's eclipsed
Sean Jackson. Sorry.
He's eclipsed 1,000 yards twice in his entire career, and that was with, what is that?
Right.
3 years of playing with Peyton Manning.
I get what you're saying, but let me list you some people that are being drafted around where Pierre Garçon is being drafted. And you tell me who you'd rather have in your team. And this is why I have him as a sleeper. It's about the value in the fantasy draft. It's not...
I'm just wondering what kind of numbers you think he's going to put up.
I think he'll have over 1,000 yards, 6-7 touchdowns.
Okay, listen, this is where he's rated, right? He's ranked 36. He's right above him is Brandon Marshall. Right below him is Eric Decker. I would take the following 5 players rated under him before.
Oh, I got a bet for you. I bet you that Pierre Garçon has more fantasy points at the end of the year than Devontae Parker.
It's an interesting bet.
You should take that. Your sleeper is Parker. My sleeper is Garçon.
Yeah, I'll take it.
All right. Let's shake on that. There's our third bet of the podcast. We have 6 total. We're probably going to have to do, by the time we get so many bets, like a mid-season bet update. We won't always bring them up. But it is kind of fascinating because by the end of the season, my co-host here is going to get slapped in the face and buy me a jersey.
Never slap me, you never will.
But I'm telling you, so like the people above him, like Brandon Marshall, you can make a case for. I just think Pierre Garçon is not getting the respect he deserves. It's his number one on a team. I mean, it's like Cameron Meredith.
I think
someone else.
Just kind of back it up, man.
But you don't want a number. Decker might not be the number one. Marshall's not the number one. Deshaun Jackson's not the number one. You don't want the number 2 sometimes. sometimes having the number one is good. Like it's kind of like your analogy with DeAndre Hopkins. He has a talent, but he's also a number one.
Well, that's not why I brought up DeAndre Hopkins. Not just because he's number one. That wasn't my analogy.
I'm saying I would rather have a number one wide receiver on a team than a number two on a bad team as well. So, for example,
there's still number ones out there.
Devontae Parker. Who?
Corey Davis. Tyrell Williams
He
will
might
probably
not, okay,
probably end up being the number one since Mike Williams is out.
Kenny Britt might be the number one in Cleveland. I'm not.
Okay, I said Corey
Oh,
Davis.
I thought you were saying Corey Coleman.
Okay, and no, I believe that Corey Coleman. By the way, my second sleeper, just to get it out of the way, Corey Coleman.
Corey Davis. So Corey Davis, you think he's number one, but you were just talking about Decker. So
I'm saying Decker's rated higher, but Corey Davis is definitely going to be their number one rider.
I don't think so.
That's why they draft.
Maybe they're number one in terms of yards, but Decker's the red zone target. That's Decker's specialty.
Couple rankings above him: Stephon Diggs, Kelvin Benjamin. Jeremy Maclin.
You got Bradford throwing to Diggs.
Jeremy Maclin.
Cam Newton is not a good thrower.
Jeremy Maclin has a lower average draft position than Pierre Garçon.
Right, that's because Mike Wallace is there, and Baltimore was very unproductive last year. So was San Francisco, but I'm telling you, coaching matters, and Kyle Shanahan is one of the best offensive coordinators. Was, and now he's a head coach. But I think we need to move on to our next sleeper. My last sleeper is Sterling Shepard of the Giants. This is a very deep sleeper. I'm not predicting he has a huge year, but he had 8 touchdowns last year. The coverage is not going to be on him. He has a rapport with Eli Manning. There's a chance he could have a pretty decent year as a wide receiver 3. I would say, at best he's a bench player, but still, he's not even being drafted right now. So if you're in those really deep leagues, I would go after Sterling Shepard. Or a dynasty league.
My idea here was to put Rashad Perriman, just because I've really wanted him to do good for a long time. But then Joe Flacco went down, and then he tweaked his hamstring. So I've decided to now change what I think is going to happen to Quincy Enunwa. And I don't think that's necessarily a deep sleeper, but, everybody's going to stay away from the Jets. You know what I mean? So if he drops a round or two past where he's supposed to go, I'd probably take him because he's kind of your logic there. He's the number one in
He might be. He's not clear number one. Pierre Garçon's clear number one. The Jets are...
Who else is on the Jets that has a name?
I don't know them.
Name one receiver on their team besides Quincy without looking at your computer.
There's a young guy. I have to look it up, but I know who Quincy is, but it doesn't mean that Quincy's a good wide receiver because I don't know 3 Jets wide. It's Darius Stewart, which I believe is a rookie. I don't know for sure though. The Jets are going to be a much worse passing team than I think San Francisco, but I don't know. We'll see.
Where are you getting this from? They probably have a more talented
quarterback
on their roster than San Francisco.
I'm telling you.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with my own statement right there. I actually believe that Brian Hoyer can be productive. I just think that the 49ers have no leg to stand on. They just don't.
And that's the whole point of getting a new, really good head coach.
Yeah, and that's why you got to rebuild.
Climate.
You still got to rebuild.
You do, but you still, you're not going to lay down.
Didn't Chuck Pagano go 1-15 his first year coaching with the Colts?
Chuck Pagano's not good.
I'm saying though, you know what I mean. Everybody believed Chuck Pagano was going to be the savior. He came in as a good coach. Everybody starts off low.
I don't know. Okay, so let's move on to the bus, and then we're going to wrap this up. We're going to try to get this one just to be an hour for you guys. Bus. Basis, again, I like to look at ADP because for me, you're busting if you're being overdrafted and you don't perform to where you're being drafted. And I just don't see Dez Bryant being where he's being drafted, right? He's being drafted right now as pretty much he's being drafted as
17th pick.
The 17th pick or so, and I don't think he's a second rounder, and maybe a third, but I think he's gonna bust. I think that Cowboy offense is gonna bust a little bit. So he's my first bust. What's yours, Mitchell?
I've kind of already named them, but let me just get my two that have already been talked about out of the way. It's Devontae Adams and Pierre Garçon are two on my bust list.
You're adding them, or they've
They're
been
both.
on there?
They're on my bust list.
Devontae Adams and Pierre Garçon, two guys that I actually really do like. Interesting to see that we have such disagreements there. I think we made a bet on both of those as well. My second bust is Alshon Jeffrey. I mentioned earlier I do not think Alshon is going to have a great year. I just don't see it. Carson Wentz, I think he's still got some work to do, and I don't know. I want him to prove it. I want him to stay healthy for more than like 5 games. And then my last one is DeAndre Hopkins, and I expressed my concerns with him, so I'll leave it over to you, or is that all of your busts?
No, I had Tyreek Hill.
I agree with this. I didn't put him as a bust. I actually should have. Tyreek Hill's being overdrafted.
I mean, I just think his value is up too high. I think he's going to have a productive year. I just don't think it's going to be. I think he's getting drafted at 20-something, maybe 30-something.
Tyreek Hill is being drafted 58.9.
Really? Oh, well.
So that's round 7 right now. I think his ADP has been falling because of these. A lot of people have been expressing concern. I just, he's a very talented player. I think he's more of a specialty player. I don't think he's like that go-to wide receiver.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's a true number 1 by any means. You know what I mean? He's definitely complimentary. But other than that, that's pretty much all the busts that I have. Did you have any more you'd like to add?
No, that's it. I just want to thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe on YouTube, the Fantasy Football Bros. Make sure you listen every week. Give us your feedback at our email address, the Fantasy Football Brothers, spelled out brothers, @gmail.com. Contact us with questions. If you send us your roster, we'll evaluate it. Pretty much, we will take care of you if you contact us. Like our Facebook page, the Fantasy Football Bros. Hopefully, we'll release podcast 3, quarterbacks and wide receivers, next week. And then after we do that, we'll probably do a mock draft for you late drafters. And then after that, we'll be in the season, so we'll give you start and sit-ems. Email us your start and sit-ems, and we'll give you a discussion.
And also, full disclosure, I am terrible at fantasy football.
And I'm decent. I haven't won a championship. I won one last year. I haven't won one in like my league. We all got that favorite league. I came in second twice there. So I'd say it's a relatively competitive league. But I like to think that I'm an above average fantasy football player. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I do my homework, and I'm always well prepared come draft time, but it doesn't necessarily always work out.
Mitchell is a cursed fantasy football player. Do not take any of his advice.
The Detroit Lions of fantasy football. So, yeah, also just know all of my stuff may change on draft day. When we reveal our actual rosters, come that week 1, before week 1 podcast, it's going to be pretty interesting to see. The most I've ever made, though, was $350. I came in second place in a really big lead. So, sometimes I have luck.
We also have our Dynasty draft this weekend that we're getting excited about. I'm picking 7 in that. I'm thinking about taking, Amari Cooper there, which might be a reach, but he's young. But we'll discuss that briefly in the next podcast. Quarterbacks and tight ends. Again, this is a Fantasy Football Bros podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure you email us.
Peace.